Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Chargers Analytics with Arjun. We are finally getting really close to training camp, something I'm super excited for, something that I will hopefully be attending if, everything lines up well. And maybe I get to see some of you guys there, some of the guys, Stephen, Alex, and Tyler there. And hopefully just a great time. Finally get to have some fans back in the stands for football and just get to see some Chargers football. That'd be something that'd be really great for the summer. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about training camp battles to watch out for. But before we do that, I want to clear a couple of things up. So the first thing I want to talk about is I announced on Thursday this past week that I will be joining PFF as a football research intern this upcoming season. So I'm going to actually be starting this week and it'll be going year round until next July. So what does that mean for me in the podcast? Well, that actually doesn't change anything I'm doing with the podcast. This is just something that I get to pursue. It helps me to get something to put on my resume and for me to be able to work with football data, which is something I've really liked and enjoyed the past couple of months. And I went through this application process. I got in, and so I'll be taking this as far as it can go. And hopefully it's something that can help me down the line when it comes to looking for jobs within the sport industry. So again, I'm super excited for this role. I really want to thank the guys at PFF for allowing me to join their team. I want to thank the guys on the podcast for helping me with this journey because, without them giving me my first break, this probably never would have been possible. But again, this is not going to change anything I do with the podcast. I'm still going to be putting out videos weekly on the podcast. And when it comes to season, my videos are just going to get even better with all the data I'm going to have access to. And again, nothing really changes with me in the podcast. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about training camp battles, right? So training camp's about 3 to 4 weeks. It includes the 3 preseason games. So there are a couple of battles between certain positions that I think are super important. And the first position is something that I think people have been talking about a lot, like really. And it ultimately is this wide receiver 3 position. So in reality, you have you're going to have 3 candidates for the position, right? You have Jalen Guyton, the incumbent wide receiver 3 starter, Tyron Johnson, who had a lot of flashes last year and really impressed me on his tape and through statistics. And then Josh Palmer, right? The rookie that not a lot of people were excited about the pick, but I think he didn't have the best quarterback play at Tennessee. Really showed out in the Senior Bowl, and he could be a really good depth option if someone like Mike Williams or Keenan Allen goes down, and is pretty much the insurance option in case Mike Williams leaves next year in free agency. But in my opinion, the wide receiver spot comes down to Tyron Johnson and Jalen Guyton. These are the 2 guys with legitimate 4.3 speed. These are the track stars, and these are the guys that will give you a home run on any given play. And we saw that a bunch of times last year, right? So just based on the counting stats, I think it's fair to say that Jalen Guyton, he had a much larger sample size, but T. Billy, which is his nickname, the Tyron Johnson's nickname, was a much more efficient receiver, right? And so we look at things like yards per reception. T. Billy had a higher yards per reception, higher reception percentage, right? So a higher percentage of T. Billy's targets were caught by Johnson. He had a higher yards per route run, which is a really important metric. I think this is one of the, if not the most important metric to evaluate wide receiver efficiency, because you're pretty much taking the amount of times or the amount of yards a wide receiver has and dividing it by the number of routes that they ran throughout the course of a season. So Tyron Johnson had almost a full 1.6 yards per route run higher than Jalen Guyton, which is really, really impressive. And the thing about Jalen Guyton is his yards per route run is one of the worst in the league, like legitimately. And T. Billy's is actually one of the highest in the league. The only problem is he has a very small sample size. He doesn't really have enough snaps to meet the snap requirement to put him on the leaderboard with guys like Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Julio Jones, guys who were elite in this category. Moving on, T. Billy has a higher average depth of target. And, this should be fair. Most of his targets really just came on these deep balls that Herbert were throwing. The Bucks game, the Raiders game in LA, and then the Jets game where he just caught a bunch of 50-yard passes, which is what his role was last year. But I'm hoping that changes just a bit, because I think we saw flashes of how efficient he could be, and him showing that he's not just a deep threat, but a guy you can count on for reliable hands, because out of the 26 targets that T. Billy had, he had 0 drops. And Guyton has 6 drops, which led to a 17.6 drop percentage. Now, I know this is one of the main reasons fans want to see Tyron Johnson as the wide receiver 3, but I'm here to tell you that drops are not something that is stable from year to year, which is why, you know, a lot of analytics people say don't go too low on guys like Deontay Johnson, because drops or guys like Jerry Jeudy, because drops are not something that are stable from year to year. And ultimately that just comes with more repetition, more practice, and more chemistry with their quarterback. So, and, you know, last thing, passer rating when targeted, T. Billy's was crazy high, and Jalen Guyton was much lower than what Johnson's was. And so my prediction with this, I think I'm gonna have to say that Jalen Guyton is gonna win this in training camp. Now, this is what I would do, or what I would hope Staley and Lombardi would implement. They do a wide receiver 3 by committee, and depending on where the Chargers are in certain situations, if they're looking for a deep shot, you use Guyton on the field. If you're on like a 3rd down and you need someone with a lot reliable hands, and you know Keenan, he might get doubled here, and so you want someone who can get open and catch the ball, you go with Tyron Johnson. If you're in the red zone, maybe use Josh Palmer, who's 6'1" and who's pretty physical. So you have this committee, and the main thing Staley and Lombardi have preached is what's the word? Disguising their looks. You want to have a bunch of these formations with a bunch of different personnel to confuse the defenses, keep them on their toes, keep them always thinking, so that when the play is going on, they're always thinking about, oh, this is a different guy on the field. How do I play him? And sooner or later, as you see, you know, someone caught a touchdown. So I think having a wide receiver 3 by committee would be the best option here. But I think if they go with one guy who plays the majority of the snaps, I think it's going to be Guyton. And honestly, there's no real preference as long as the roles don't change, and these guys are mainly used as deep threats. All right. So the second thing I want to talk about is the cornerback 2/3 position. So we all know Chris Harris and Michael Davis are the cemented starters going into next year. But this cornerback 2 spot outside of Michael Davis is something that I think no one's really talking about. And everyone's assuming that Asante Samuel is going to take over that role. Right. But we've heard a lot of training camp rumors that Brandon Faison has been impressing. And he has, you know, a real ideal build for a cornerback: 6'1", long arms, like willing tackler, someone who's not afraid to get down and dirty against running backs. He showed that in 2019 when Michael Davis went down with a hamstring strain. So I think Asante Samuel should win this out. And if he doesn't, I'm not sure if it's because Brandon Faison really impressed, or if Asante Samuel really disappointed, because Asante Samuel is a 2nd-round pick, right? So, okay, so as you can see here, Brandon Staley likes to spread out the amount of formations that he uses on defense. He likes to run a lot of nickel, or this is dime. So he likes to run dime, nickel, base here, nickel, and then base again. So Brandon Staley wants to try to spread out the amount of coverages and formations he uses. But the thing is, with the Rams, he didn't really have this good linebacking group. But in LA, he's staying in LA, but with the Chargers, he has Kenneth Murray, he has Drew Tranquill, he has Kaiser White. I actually don't think we're going to see a ton of dime packages used this season unless it's an absurd 3rd and 15 plus, right? I think you want to have guys like Kenneth Murray and Drew Tranquill on the field for tackling and for speed, and to give you the ability to blitz off the edge. So this CB2 position is really important. I think between Asante Samuel and Brandon Faison, I think Samuel should win this battle. One of the traits for a cornerback that is translatable from the college to the NFL that is statistically proven is ball skills. So Asante Samuel does have a proven record of interceptions plus pass breakups when targeted. And that's something that's translatable from Florida State to LA with the Chargers. So I think Asante Samuel should realistically win this battle. But even if he doesn't, the Chargers are going to run a ton of nickel and dime to the point where he's going to see the field. I brought this up in my last video, where we could see a personnel package of Michael Davis and Brandon Faison on the outside, Asante Samuel as the nickel back, Chris Harris as the dime backer, Derwin James at safety. Or if you want to have more better tacklers at the line of scrimmage, you put Chris Harris at nickelback, Derwin James at dimebacker, and Asante Samuel at safety. Because remember, Derek Ansley and Ronaldo Hill, all of them said that they're training Asante Samuel, Chris Harris, and Derwin James to be these quote unquote positionless players, training them at nickelback, dime backer, safety, and outside corner potentially, right? Which is something we could see with Asante Samuel and Chris Harris, who could move inside if Chris Harris decides to leave in 2022. Okay. And so the last training camp battle, there's not really much information to talk about here, but it's going to be that tight end 2 spot. We all know Jared Cook is the unquestioned tight end 1, but the tight end 2 spot really comes down to between Trey McKitty and, in my opinion, Donald Parham. I think Steven Anderson showed flashes at the end of last year, but he needs to show he can do work on special teams, and he'd be able to be effective as a blocker. So while Donald Parham has the receiving skills, Trey McKitty has the blocking, which is one of his traits coming out of college. So what I think is going to happen is on early downs, we're going to see a lot of Trey McKitty. I think he's the guy. He might even be the only tight end on the field when the Chargers decide to run the ball. Jared Cook isn't a guy that you see blocking in line very much. They like to line him up in the slot and get him in matchups where he has the advantage, right? So Trey McKitty is going to be the guy when the Chargers want to run the ball, when they're in the red zone and they want to be able to get 5-6 yards, or potentially when they're up against the goal line, he's going to be the guy in. But this doesn't mean Donald Parham shouldn't see the field just because he can't block. You want to also show that you believe in his ability to block, but you're not only using him when you're passing, because that makes it obvious to the defense that, oh, okay, the 6'9" dude's in. Okay, they're just going to be passing the ball, right? You need to show some type of ability to run the ball and pass the ball when both of them or either of them are on the field, because you want to try to mix up the defense's looks and you want to try to keep them on their toes depending on what type of play you're running. And like, I think Donald Parham should be a candidate to get maybe 6-7+ touchdowns this season, depending on the Chargers' red zone efficiency and the success and their play calling inside the red zone, which was abysmal last year, to say the least. So what I think is going to happen, I think McKitty wins this tight end 2 position. And I think he wins it based on the idea that he's going to get more snaps than Parham. But I do think Parham is going to be more valuable to this team, barring health. And I think he's going to have a good year. And I really do believe that Joe Lombardi and Staley are going to find a creative way to use him, because that guy is a monster in the red zone. And we saw that last year, like when he ran that back shoulder fade against the Bucs. I mean, how do you stop a 6'9" dude when your safety, most safeties are like shorter than 6'2", right? Okay, so again, to recap, I think Jalen Guyton wins the wide receiver 3 position. I think Asante Samuel wins the cornerback 2 position, or /3, depending on how you view it. And I think Trey McKitty wins the tight end 2 position, but I think Donald Parham is the more valuable player at the end of the year. So, that brings us to the end of the episode. Leave your predictions for these training camp battles. I'm planning to go to the first training camp and then the third one. And then depending on how those go, I might get tickets for camps later down, going closer to the season. So if you're going to be there, make sure to, say hi to me. I'm willing to meet most of the Bolts fam and say hi, say what's up. And I think the response here on this podcast has been great. So it'd be cool to finally meet some of the people who have been watching my videos. And again, me joining PFF has nothing to do with what I'm going to be doing here on the Guilty as Charged podcast. And make sure to leave any comments for any potential topics. I'm kind of at that point where there's not much real to talk about since we're going into training camp. So make sure to leave any comments for any topics you want me to go over. And with that, as always, Bolt up.